It's scrolling. There you go. All right, and welcome to this week's AV Tech Talks. I'm Ed Willock, one of your co-hosts, along with Chris Brown. Omar, unfortunately, is running a little late. He has one of those things, what are they called? Jobs, working. He actually has a gig. So we're super happy for him that he's got something going on, and it ran a little late tonight. As we are running a little bit late tonight, we had a couple technical glitches on our end, but we are here talking about Millumin. We're going to kind of jump right into it. Chris, you got anything before we kick it off to Dave, who's going to walk us through this?
No, thank you guys for joining us. Sorry we're running a little bit late, but we're going to jump right in and get any questions you have answered and get everything going that you came here for tonight.
Excellent. So with that, Dave, tell us about Millumin.
All right. Well, it's great to be with you guys. And I've got a few slides to kick it off. So I want to share my screen here and hit play. So are you guys seeing that full screen? Did I lose you?
No.
Sorry, I think I had to give you the permission.
Do I need to reshare?
I think so. Yep. Sorry about that.
All right.
We have some minor technical difficulties. Bear with us one moment.
Yeah, we probably should have done a dry run on this. My fault.
There we go.
Great. Yeah, now I see the share thing. Super. So thanks to Omar, Ed, and all the AV Educate guys to make this happen every week. And I want to give credit where credit's due. Some of these images and the deck are screenshots from the tutorials and live streams on the Millumin YouTube channel. They just started a live YouTube stream about, I guess, once a week or so, maybe 2 weeks. And they're long. They're a little difficult to understand because the developer is French and he tries really hard to speak English and does a pretty good job most of the time. But I'm going to give you 6 hours worth of Millumin Tech Talks of his streams pared down to 15 minutes. So we'll see how that goes. But I'd invite you guys to chime in with questions anytime. And let's go. What's Millumin? First of all, it's a Mac only application, so it will not run on a PC. It's been around a little while. I think most people use it as a media server. And what a lot of people don't know is how much custom content you can create with it. It uses things called shaders and uses the graphics card to generate things, and of course composers involved, and you can write custom code and do all sorts of crazy stuff with it. Some people, if you really want to get aggressive or do a one-man show, you can control lights with it. You can get a little USB to DMX dongle and drive DMX dimmers or moving lights. It'll output ArtNet and SCDN or something along those lines. That's not a format I'm that familiar with. I'm just going to touch on lighting a little bit, show you how the interface works. But I don't have, DMX stuff here. It's all just plug-in lights, so I can't really demo the lighting much more than just showing you how the interface works. You can also trigger IP commands, with OSC and all sorts of stuff. So it'll take commands in and it'll also spit commands out. So you can kind of use it as a hub for all the IP control stuff you want to do. And lastly, it is, like I mentioned, it's designed in France. So the documentation is English, but with a very good French spin. And I think that's why it's a little less commonly used and a little less commonly endorsed in America. But it was a Live Design Award winner a year or two ago. So jumping into the media server component of it. And again, feel free to jump in and ask questions, but I'm going to get into a full live demo and start walking you through how to build a project and that here in just a second. We're going to blast through a dozen slides. So it will play back almost any media that QuickTime will. And it has the ability to transcode media if it's not optimized for playback, but it'll play back most stuff just right off the cuff. You can put live inputs into it. I'm feeding my camera into it right now through a Aja UTAP, but I've got a Magewell. I was hoping, I picked this up today. a little Magewell USB SDI capture device. I was really hoping to get that plugged in, but didn't happen. It'll also take NDI inputs. Let's see,
Hey,
Siphon. Yes,
Dave, there's a tab in the middle of that screen that we're seeing.
a tab.
Yeah, it says opening your keynote, I think.
Interesting, because I don't see that.
Yeah, it's right in the middle.
Let me stop the share.
Sure.
And restart it.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, Zoom is tricky sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I will share it off the desktop and then take it, and maybe that will. Is it still there?
Nope. There we go.
Great. So, like I said, plays back audio, plays back video, pretty much anything. QuickTime used to be a definition of stuff it'd play back, although Apple's kind of doing away with QuickTime. But it'll also play back still images. It's like I said, it'll take live audio and video inputs. The Blackmagic mini recorder over Thunderbolt is really popular, especially if you have a trash can, because it's got 6 Thunderbolt plugs, so you can plug multiples of those in. I was looking for one to plug into this machine and thought I had one, but I couldn't find it tonight. You can also use your webcam and your FaceTime camera if you want something along those lines, or a Kinect. It'll take both the Kinect 1 and the Kinect 2. You can keyframe all sorts of effects. Tons of effects you can imagine, and some you wouldn't have imagined. It's got. It'll recognize keying and alpha transparency. So if you put in a PNG 24 with the transparent area, it'll recognize that and key it out. I'll demonstrate that. I think you can drop Photoshop files and it'll recognize the transparency. It'll recognize transparency, I believe, over NDI. Maybe Hardeep can jump on that question. Yes, he's nodding yes. One neat thing about Millumin is that you can tie, they call them interactions. So you can hook up a MIDI controller or use your keyboard or a mouse, or they have something called a blob tracker where it'll track a highlight spot in a piece of live input video, and you can attach some of the effect parameters to that input. So you can really use it like a live performance controller. There is it's called the Leap, I believe, that you can wave your hand over it and it'll recognize your hands, and you can tie different parameters to your different fingers and play it like an air keyboard or air guitar. Moving on to the content generator, like I mentioned, it uses OpenGL and the Quartz Composer. It mainly uses the video card to create a lot of the stuff, and Macs are pretty strong when it comes to video cards, so that's what makes it a pretty powerful system. As I mentioned, its effect generators are called shaders. I think that harkens back to where they come from, which is the video game world and 3D world, where they're using some of this programming to create the shading on the sides of objects and the surfaces of objects. But we have them to be able to put into our projects and map onto things. It will accept custom shader libraries, ISF, and I'll give you the link at the end of this deck for the ISF custom shader library, which is kind of an open source library where you can get all sorts of generators. There's a screenshot of the website. And as I mentioned, keying and alpha transparency, there are some of the shaders that include that. If not, you can also add chroma key and luma key effects to them. And just like everything else, you've got those interactive adjustments. I'm just going to throw this slide up. I'm not really going to touch on it, but I just thought this was the coolest thing. Using the Kinect 2, you can use the depth mapping in the Kinect, the depth camera, and you can map parameters to that as well as create live masks. So if you look in the lower right-hand corner, you're seeing the live input from the camera of this slide, but then you're seeing how it's mapping over a shader in real time. There's a neat tutorial online. It takes about an hour to get through the whole thing, but you can do that with infrared cameras, so you can have someone moving around in the dark and it can still map their body, which is pretty crazy. So let's get down to what I've used it for and what I'll have the most experience with. Luckily, I'm not the only expert on Millumin on the panel. I've used it for spanning video content across multiple screens, projection, LED walls, or processors, and it's great for that. Although there are some crevettes with a Mac, you don't have synced outputs. So you have to, if you need synced outputs, say you're doing a projection blend and you don't want, a diagonal line moving across the blend to tear a little bit, there are some workarounds. Two real popular ones. The first one is the data path X4, where you just feed one big output that is in sync with itself, and then it splits it up, and it does that in real time, and those outputs stay synced. Or the E2 now. You can put an 8K signal into an E2 or an believe an S3 if it's got the layers, and then you can slice it up there and feed your different outputs. I've used it as video playback cues. What inspired me to kind of volunteer for this tech talk was watching the QLab demo and saying, hey, Millumin does a lot of this stuff too. I wonder if the guys would be interested in this. So use it for that. I've used it for branding, just like digital gobos on things. One thing that Millumin is really good at is real-time manipulation and keystoning. So I can throw a projector towards a wall, feed it with Millumin, and in real time just warp it in really fast. And I can throw out several projectors and just warp in all the different logos all around the surfaces of the room. A video mapping, that's kind of another word for it. I'll show you an example of that. Here is one of two use cases I'm going to show you, just blasting through it here. This is a financial services client. Sorry, I had to cover up their logo on the screens there. But what you see in the upper left-hand corner is a 2176 by 1200 pixel LED wall. This is what happens when the project manager specs the wall and not the video engineer. So it was just a little over the 1920 by 1200 processor capability. So we had two columns on the right-hand side that were in a separate processor. And we were like, what are we going to do about that? So we had to obviously add a second processor, but we had, 8 video inputs and we wanted to span it and we wanted to do pips. And so instead of throwing an S3 or an E2 at it, which is a great solution, this company doesn't own any of those, but they own a bunch of little 4A HD switchers. So I threw my Millumin media server backpack config in my backpack and flew to LA, and we piped the output of their video switcher with all their various inputs into the Millumin, and then I spit out the Millumin to two PDS 701s that I used as my backup failover switch. You see those under the switcher there on the left. I wish I could point, but yeah, I can annotate, but I can't get my mouse to show up on that screen. So anyway, I use that so that I can just have one Millumin machine. I also do that with Watchout too. Just throwing PDSs with a logo store of the composite failover slide, just in case the whole thing goes down, which I've had them, both Millumin and Watchout go down on me, and you just, take the freeze and then reboot and you're, back up and running in no time. But I was able to feed both processors just what they needed and then composite it all in Millumin. So I took the output of the switcher, fed it into a Blackmagic micro recorder. And this particular show, there's a center pip and there's branding on both sides. So the client's branding's always on the right over their podium, and the interviewee's branding's always on the left. So we had 75 different brands that all had to fit and look and alpha over a moving background. So I had the moving background and I could just throw all of their alpha channeled logos in. I could desaturate them down to white if I needed to. And I could size them right on the fly on the wall. And the project manager could look up and say a little bigger, a little smaller, and I could just squeeze them really quick. Then in the center pip, which was still on the one output, so it didn't tear, I was able to bring up live inputs. And this was a telepresence that they did live. This was 5 years ago, so it was long before Zoom was popular. But we also had video roll-ins, we had PowerPoint machines, we had all sorts of stuff feeding into Millumin. Any questions on that use case?
That just sounds like a whole bunch of stuff that you had to make this machine do. Which, you know, I took some watch out training the beginning of this year, and some of the people in that class were saying that they're using Millumin in place of watch out sometimes, just because of how much faster you can work with it to do similar results. So
Yes, absolutely. You just grab something and size it, and it's immediate. Now, Watch Out 6 came out with something called live something, where it updates about 1 frame a second. So you can size stuff and it goes jink, 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 where Millumin's just almost real time. It's almost, 30 frames a second when you're sizing something or making a pip bigger or smaller. It's really smooth.
And did you have any eGPUs on that, or was that all just the internal?
That was
graphics?
a mid-range graphics card trash can with a low-end processor and maxed out RAM, and of course the SSDs. So it was two 1920 1200 outs is what I was feeding out of it, and 1 input from the switcher.
Gotcha.
So it was not, and of course the operator view, which you saw on that monitor, it was not working hard. This time on this show, this use case, it was working hard. I could warm my coffee on the top of the trash can.
Wow.
This was 6 projectors, 2 dedicated scenic projectors. I flew to Bermuda with my little trash can in the back and had to go through customs. That was fun. They brought me back in the office and had me explain what this black orb was in the customs office. Luckily, I had all my paperwork lined up to get it in the country. And here we had this kind of zigzaggy set in a semicircular kind of picture a college, the room where, exhibit room or concert hall, whatever you call them, a lecture hall. That's the term I'm looking for. So we came into this lecture hall and put up all these panels and then screens in front of them. The center screen is rear screen projected so that the presenters could stand in front of it and not cast a shadow. The sides are front projected, and then the overall set is front projected, all the surround. So everything was just white with regular daylight screens. And what I did was I had dedicated projectors for the content screens on the sides so that I could do, for walk-in, I could do one giant image, but then when we went into content, I could go right out of the switcher to those side screens with iMag, and there'd be no latency. One thing with Watch Out or Millumin is you're going to have latency if you feed a live input to it. It's fine for PowerPoint. If your video playbacks go through it, then you need to make sure you have a digital console with some delay. I forget what it is. It really depends on the speed of your machine, I would imagine. And Hardy, maybe you can say that. Yeah, you're shaking your head. That's good.
Yeah.
I love having you on here. I can say something and you shake it. Okay, I got that one right. But then what I would do was when we went to content, I had Millumin cues that just turned the squares where the screens were black, and the video switcher brought up the projectors feeding those content screens. So I wasn't losing resolution on the side content screens for the content because there were lots of spreadsheets on this, lots of small numbers. The center screen, the content was going through Millumin. So, but that was just matching content out of the switcher. So it was pretty cool. And one thing about this was, if you look near the center screen in the top picture, you see how the set steps down. There are all sorts of soffits and there's steps at the bottom. Millumin, I was able to just make a 10 pixel by 10 pixel black JPEG, throw it in Millumin, and then I could resize it on the fly. And someone on stage could call, 2 pixels down, 3 pixels over, and map out black areas really quick and map around all the stuff so I didn't have any stray light shining on anything. There might be better ways to do that, but that was really fast and effective. So yeah, that's
Pretty cool trick.
yeah, that's the lots of mapping around stuff bullet in this slide. One thing about this job, just a side note, was after the local vendor who supplied some of the stuff came and saw it, he pitched having me projection map the City Hall of Bermuda for the year 2000 New Year's Eve. Didn't get that job. I wish I had. It was an all-white building, mostly square. It would have been the easiest projection mapping gig ever. Bermuda, on New Year's Eve. So let's jump into the interface. This looks like just about every other video interface you can imagine. iMovie, maybe. The first thing you'll notice is the media library on the left. When you open the program, this is not here. And it's probably one of the most frustrating things because you're like, how do I get media into the thing? There's a little dot, or it's a triangle in the bar that separates the media library from the next window over. And you click on that and it'll expand over. I don't know why it wouldn't launch with that exposed. I guess they want you to drag stuff right into the timeline at the bottom or the canvas in the middle. So speaking of that, that's the layer, dashboard, timeline. It does a lot of different things, a lot more than a normal timeline. And I'm going to explain that in a second, just going through the main interface. The guys from Millumin call this the output workspace. I like to call it the canvas, but it can hold multiple canvases. So I guess that's why they chose the output workspace. You can have all sorts of crazy sizes and shapes and multiple outputs all in this one part of the interface. It's also where the preview window and you shift into lighting are. Finally, the properties inspector. They just called it properties something. I just called it properties in the demo. These are stolen slides here, or screenshots. I called it the inspector. This is where you set all the parameters. And there's a little weird trick to changing parameters on the fly that's a little different. On most programs, you have a slider or you have up and down buttons next to the numbers. Here, I was so frustrated for the first days I was using it because I couldn't just slide parameters. I would always have to click and type in something. Then I realized that you could just hold your mouse down on the number and slide from left to right, and it would affect the number in real time. So that's another thing I hunted for a long time, figuring out how to use the interface. So here's the difference at the bottom between, first of all, the dashboard mode and the timeline mode. They look pretty similar. The dashboard is more of a playback, like a soundboard. So you see the play buttons at the top. Those are your cues. And then below your cues are all the layers and interactivity that you want in that cue. So you'll see layers that the top layer is the frontmost, and it goes, back in Z space from there. You can also have timelines embedded into these cues. And so when you trigger something off the dashboard, it'll trigger a timeline or it'll trigger keyframeable content directly. And you can stop and modify just layers in Millumin, which is kind of a little VJ trick I've seen some guys use. It's a new thing now is that you can keyframe in Millumin 3. You can now keyframe some of the effects parameters, sizing, shape, and stuff on the dashboard view. You used to not really be able to do that. You used to have to go into a timeline to do it, but now you can do it right there. You can also, I believe, I'm jumping into the timeline now. On the timeline, you want to use it for time-based keyframing, where you want this interaction between two pieces of media to happen at a certain time in the playback operation of that media, if that makes sense. So you could have a video play and then a logo bug pop up on top of the video, or it could black out something or blur something in a portion of the video that you didn't want seen, or it could ramp down the audio. You can do that in the dashboard view, but it may not play the timeline in the media in the exact same place, depending on when you hit it and how it interacts. So that makes the timeline a little different from the dashboard. But most people just trigger stuff off the dashboard. All right, going to touch on lighting here, and I'll also touch on it in the demo. Another screenshot grab. Here you don't see the input list. You just see the canvas, and it switched over to light mode. So you see a center X, which is kind of your origin point in the center of your plot, and you can drag or you add light fixtures to it. You can pick the type of light fixture. You can see all of its parameters. You can even add light fixtures, custom light fixtures if you want. And then what you do is you create looks in this of intensities, directions, and all that. And then you save them to dashboard presets. So that's how the lighting control works. And then it'll spit out the ArtNet or the DMX value when you take that dashboard look of all those light fixtures doing their thing. And here's in the lower left-hand corner, you see a USB to DMX dongle coming out of this guy's laptop going into a little dimmer pack. And so he was able to bring up the slider and see the little lights go up and down in real time, and then just store that look. I don't see a lot of people using this. I imagine if you were, in a small theater department at a college or something, and you wanted to do some sort of, one technical guy show, you could drive the lighting and all the audio cues and all the video cues all off Millumin, which would be kind of cool. Jump past it. Didn't remember my clicks. So here's some websites. They're also short. I don't think you need me to write them down. It's just millumin.com is the website. Right at the upper right-hand corner, you can click on the YouTube logo and go to their YouTube channel, where these are some of the new live stream recordings that the developers put out. And they really do a good job of walking you through, but they do take a while to watch. He takes breaks in the middle and just like goes and makes coffee and leaves it on stream for 5 minutes and stuff like that. ISF.video is the site for the additional shader libraries. NDI.tv is, if you're not into NDI, that could be a whole nother side topic. It's a way to receive video over the network and spit video out to other devices over the network. So Millumin can accept NDI sources, and it can output NDI to other computers, displays, things of that nature. And I have, well, if I can make this work, it'll be amazing. Here is my iPad that's behind me. Here are some of the NDI apps that you can get that allow you to see NDI sources, allow you to, for $9, you can feed the output of your phone or your iPad into Millumin. So that's kind of neat.
Dave, to be able to see that, we would have to unshare your screen.
Oh, yeah, I'm done. So I can stop to share if you want, or you can. Stop share.
There you go.
All right.
Great. So that's now your iPad's up.
Yeah. There's that little window opening the keynote. Now I can see it. So yeah, that's my iPad. That's just a spattering of the apps that you can get. They're all like $10, and I don't use it a lot, so it's not my iPad either. I just borrowed one. So I didn't want to buy it on their account, but you can use your iPad as, anything you see on it. I've used iPads as roving cameras, where I've just it was a refrigerator and freezer demo for Electrolux major appliances. They wanted to show off their new chest type freezer on a show. And they said, can we have a roving camera person? And I was like, why don't you just take my iPad? And the salesperson was able to just take the iPad and look down into the freezer. And they thought that was the greatest thing, because it was just feeding live right onto the screens. So that's how we're going there. And you can do that with NDI. You can feed that right into Millumin. So are you ready for the demo?
I think so. Are there any questions from here on the panel before we start moving on?
Now I'm going to ask this before somebody else does. This is not on Windows yet, right?
No, it is that was my very first bullet. It's a Mac only application. They do not have a lot of interest in building for Windows. It's a very small development team. it's kind of a passion project for a couple guys who are as much technical theater guys as they are, programmers. And so they just kind of develop it at their own pace.
I was just curious because I hear Ed, and I knew it was on Mac only because Ed said something about the eGPU and hooking it up with Macs and things like that. And the processing power for a GPU that's in a standard Windows laptop cost half the price of a Mac, and you'd be able to run it without maxing your settings out. So
Yeah, you may hear the noise from this pretty beefy MacBook ramp up as I show you some stuff on it. Yeah, I agree with you. I was a Mac diehard for 20 years and switched over to PC about a year and a half ago. Haven't looked
I
back.
think just on that, with the developers, we've pushed them so hard to go to PC based. Because one of the biggest problems, as Dave's mentioned, is the tiering on outputs. It's really powerful that you could do the spanning across multiple outputs. Put it on a PC, you'll have sync. They just won't do it.
And I mean, one great thing about Millumin that Watchout doesn't have is Watchout requires you to have the same output resolution on every output of a single player machine. So if you want a 4K output on one output and a 1080 on another, you have to have an additional key because one player computer, this is not Millumin, this is Watchout, where Millumin, I can have 640 by 480 on one output, 720 on the next, 1080 on the next, and 4K on the next. So that's another real nod to Millumin on that capability.
All right. Until your machine runs out of gas, because that sounded like
they do get warm. They are Afterburner compatible. So if you do get one of the new Mac Pros, if you have that kind of money, you can do that, and it will soak up that Afterburner card.
I think the developers had tested. It's actually more beneficial to buy the Afterburner rather than the dual. I think they've got the GPU, which has got 2 chips on the GPU. I'm not familiar with it off memory, but yeah, don't buy the most expensive graphics card. Buy the one lower, but Afterburn it.
Interesting.
The reason why that is, and I can kind of go into that, the reason why that is when you're trying to use Afterburner on a dual GPU setup, the dual GPU doesn't play nicely with Afterburner. So you get some clock speed lag between the 2 GPUs and you'll never catch up. So where you're talking about that tearing and things like that, you'll never recover from it if that's the case.
Interesting. Great. So I'm going to, so if I share my screen, you can't see my video at the same time?
We can. It just shows up small in the corner.
Oh, that's fine. So I'm going to share this screen, and then I'm going to switch over to 7. So what you're seeing in the main screen is where the interface is going to be, where you see my mouse moving. And then on the other screen, where you see the mouse moving now, is going to be the output. So that was a fun thing to figure out how to do yesterday. Here's the little Millumin icon. It looks like a little ghost. When it pops up, you can create a new project, or some of your recent projects will pop up. Now, right now, just FYI, they are doing a neat promotion where you can buy Millumin for $1, a limited license. So I dropped $1. And here we are. So here you see the interface. It looks like iMovie. You've got a canvas here. It defaults to just a random canvas. So you've got a few things. I feel like they could do something with this real estate more than just leaving it blank. But if you throw media in your input and it could be better, you can click this and you can transcode it to ProRes or HAP right there, which is kind of cool. It'll also give you any other optimizations that it sees you could do. You can just hit info and it'll take you right to a web page to help you resolve and optimize your project. It's kind of cool. Here's the output. So when you click that, you get a kind of canvas world. It's throwing out the other output, and I can display a test card. And I see that it's displaying on the laptop monitor, which is not what I'm feeding. So I'm going to feed it. I want to switch it to the output that's feeding you. So you saw it go black, and now I'm going to display the test card, and now you guys see the output test card. Correct?
Yes.
All right, good. This is really helpful when you just your HDMI cables all fell out and you've got to figure out which output went to which projector, because it'll tell you which output is, it'll number them, which canvas it is, and tell you the resolution and things of that nature. And it's also circular, so you know if you're stretching and your aspect is weird. Herein, you can also do your feathering. If you wanted to create
Real quick, for anybody that's trying to see what he's demonstrating, you're going to have to look in the upper, I think it's for you, the upper right-hand corner of where his camera would normally be while he's showing the screen display, and you can see the images moving on his camera display of what he's actually doing.
Great, thank you for that. If I wanted to have a multi-screen blend and span content across it, I can just go right here and I can add another surface and just, I can span between my desktop, you know, on the laptop. I can spit it out to NDI, as I mentioned, with and without an alpha channel, which is kind of cool. If I need to corner pin or keystone correct that screen, I can just grab it and you see this move in real time. It's the craziest thing. If I, let me do it on this one so you guys can see it. You see how quick that is? Moving on the other display.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so if you need to projection map something, this is a nice tool to keep in your back pocket. And this is color correction. So if you want to do a gamma or an RGB color correction to match two outputs, say one projector's, you know, looking a little green compared to the other, you don't have to noodle with the projection remotes. You can just go right into here and adjust your RGB drives. So now that I've created two things, I can go in between and I can do an edge blend. And it'll blend those two projection images together, which is kind of cool. I can also do it vertical. And you can do something called advanced, where if I create a new, so I'm hitting this plus key, I'm creating a new canvas. So now I have a 1 and a 2, going back into advanced. Where are they? Are they on top of each other? I'm not sure where the other one is. Oh, it's just showing me one at a time. Okay. Here you can adjust sizing and shaping and things like that in the advanced if you really want to dig into some of the pixel counts and things of that nature. If you are into mapping, maybe Hardeep, you can delve into this. I have not used the mapping aspect of this. You can create surfaces here.
Yep.
And then you can, so, you know, this is one surface.
If you double click on any one of those corners, you can then enter values.
Nice. And here's where, if it's got the dashed lines under it, you see my cursor change. And you see as I move it, it goes up and down in real time.
One thing that Millumin have done from previous was 00 was center screen, not top left.
Mm.
And that was a big bugbear for a lot of people, including us, because when you're mapping, you know exactly where things are in relation to 00 being top left. Now, if you go to Millumin 3 at the top bar, you can go to the preferences and change where 00 lives.
Interesting. Yeah, like contours.
Now, Dave, should we be seeing anything on that second screen?
No, because I am actually messing around with the one that I'm getting ready to blow away, I think.
Gotcha.
Oh, no, I just wasn't displaying the test card. I was displaying the test card. I don't know. Let me get rid of this second canvas just so I don't make the machine work any harder. Now, if I do want to, you can also import a 3D file and you can assign the different surfaces to different things. So this is, again, outside of what I've done with it, but it looks pretty cool. So here we are back in our output. Turn off the...
Yeah, we're still not seeing your anything on that second where your camera would be.
It turned off the display. So now I've reset it as the Blackmagic HDMI.
We're back.
And I'm displaying the test card.
Great.
One thing with that area that we've noticed with Mac is if you have multiple outputs, so 1, 2, 3, and you've cabled them up to your projectors 1, 2, 3, you restart your Mac, there's a good chance that 1, 2, 3 isn't the same order. So where you've dropped down on each, so there you'll end up with 3 Blackmagic HDMI connectors or 3 Panasonic projector outputs. They're not often in the same order. It's because Mac doesn't ID the physical output connections to your output system, so it doesn't remember that. So it'll throw them in random orders. So one thing that we often do if we're doing like a multi-canvas edge blend, you'll throw up the test pattern. You'll see where it'll say number. It should say 1, 2, 3, 4 on the projection output. It doesn't. So you have to have a little fiddle around there.
Yeah, so if you look over on my test card, I know it's really small. Right under BMD HDMI, it says canvas 1 of 3. See how that works? I'm going to turn that one off. Now I'm going to go to 2 and make that my Blackmagic. And so now you see it says 2 of 3 in the test card. So that was a great ad to help you ID which projector and which output is going where. Let's go back. Here is where you can also make something a siphon output. For those of you guys who haven't used siphon, it's sort of like there's Soundflower or some of the Loopback, I believe it's called, where you can route audio around your Mac from application to application. Siphon does the same thing for video. So I can create a siphon output and output 2. And then I can make this one my Blackmagic display. And now I'm going to close this, and you see that this half is outputting to siphon, and this half is outputting to my screen. Now you say, why would you want to do that? If I wanted to have a piece of video that's tracking, so I could take an input. Here's that little, well, now that I opened it, can you not close it? Guess not. I don't know why it starts off closed, but you click it and then it opens. So now under siphon, you can add, I thought it was here. Where's siphon at? It should be showing up. Siphon should be one of your options so that I can use that and put it onto here, and I can add effects and things over here, and they'll show up over here. It's kind of a wild option. That's how they do some of the masking and things. They apply the filters on one, and then take that siphon track in and put it on their actual output canvas. Now I'm curious where the siphon input is. Well, while we're going through inputs, let's just start at the top. Input 1. So here's my FaceTime camera. I can throw it right here or right here and take that cue. And now you see me. And now you see how I can just grab it and manipulate it. In real time, I can just grab it and shrink it. And you see how fast and responsive it is on the output. Oh, interesting. So over here on the right in this canvas, I created some 3D slices. So for mapping, when I went into advanced, I created these surfaces and I can instantly snap content onto those surfaces. So if you are mapping, two specific screens, you can create surfaces. I'll go back into the output tab and show you that again. Under the surface menu, you see I've got a red surface and a yellow surface I created with the plus and minus. So now those are available and I can move them over. Oh, there's my blue surface. All right, cool.
You have a question that came in from Facebook.
Yes.
Got a few of them coming here. So one question I have is I've been utilizing my stream decks to trigger the Millennium. Excuse me.
Millumin.
Yeah, Millumin. Sorry. Millumin 3 playback machines for playback usually involves triggering multiple size canvases and delay screens, etc. He says, I'd be curious to see how you set your stream deck up on larger shows. I usually just trigger the column numbers on my timeline, but might there be a more productive setup that he could put onto his stream deck?
I believe you can set it up to trigger next column and take next column and take previous column. So it only takes up, 2 buttons on your stream deck. That would be if you're going in order and your show's set up that way. And then maybe if there are a couple just, safety bail slides, you could set those up, main logo, walk in, walk out, or oops, technical difficulty slides. You could set those up as their own buttons, direct column hits, but next column and previous column are good ways to do that.
Awesome.
So now you see how I created 3 surfaces here. And now those show up in my mapping, even though they don't show up here, but I can snap a piece of content to that mapping. So this is really great if you have, say, a set piece with a window and you want clouds to go across the window. You could go through real time really quickly and set just the parameters of that window. And if while you're in it, say you've put this here and you're seeing your output and you go, oh, that slice isn't right, I can just hit the slice editor. Or the content doesn't fit and do it that way. You see how it's shrinking me. There's lots of different distortions and I think if you do it that way, now it distorts in and out. It shows you how it's stretching. Because this is showing you what's displayed within the slice. So if you only want my face in the slice, so it creates a reframing of your pip really fast.
One use case for that we've used previously is LED walls, where they're not a solid wall, but small portrait sections, for example. And we need to map the gaps between. So if you've got content on the 16:9 frame, and then need to spit out sort of certain slices into the process in certain different ways, gives you more flexibility.
I'm going to go into my surfaces and just kill all these to keep the machine working. It's not that delicate, but I don't want the roar of the fans on this laptop to overwhelm you. So I'm back down to my one output here. Just keeping it simple. On that trash can Mac that I had, I was able to output 2 4Ks, feed another 4K via siphon into one of the other ones, and do a 1080 operator monitor all at the same time. With it, it wasn't struggling. I could add a few effects too, and live inputs, 1920 1080 live input. So if you have a decent sized machine, I wouldn't try to run this on a Intel, a GPU on the motherboard Mac Mini. But if you have a decent MacBook Pro or an older Mac Pro, especially if you have a new Mac Pro, you're going to be in great shape. So I've put a piece of content here. Say I want to put that on one side, and I want a zoom window next to it. So I'm going to come down here in my layers. I'm going to hit the plus, add another layer. So this is all within this one queue, sort of like playing Battleship. I want to do a screen capture. Edit board. Cool. Click the screen capture. So if you ever click on something in here and you're like, why is it doing what I want? Hit the edit board button. Now I can select just this one piece of content, and I can say, what app do I want to look at? So I've got all sorts of apps. Zoom floating video window. Let's see what that is. Hey, look at you guys. So I can snag my Zoom floating window of everybody, and I can drop it right in here. And I've got all sorts of little, like the Photoshop blend modes. I'm going to have you guys darken me, or multiply over me, or screen over me. What was down there in the bottom? If this had an alpha channel, if it was coming in off NDI or something, it could take that. It can create a Luma matte or inverted Luma matte. It's got some really cool stuff, but you see how quickly you can composite things up.
Go ahead, Jason. You got a question?
Yeah, I have a question that just sparked me. We've been doing the live concerts where the artists are able to see the feedback from Facebook or Instagram, wherever we're streaming to, and seeing this, I could basically create where they would be able to. I could fly a Zoom room in that the artists could see on the screen, as well as see the comments that are coming in as well, so they could interact visually with the people as well as with what they're commenting simultaneously. Is this what I'm?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. If I wasn't sharing my screen and had my main Zoom interface, I could bring up the chat window.
Okay.
And it would appear as one of the options in this list.
Okay, yeah, because a friend of ours, Tuna, he's doing the live Zoom in, so people are able to party with the DJs and all this stuff. So if we're able to fly the people in as well, that's another option, especially if we're going into pay-per-view lives later on. We can give people the options to actually be seen on the visuals with the DJ or the
that's great.
Okay, cool. That's awesome.
Yeah. So, you can even snag your dock and use it as an element.
Huh.
The dock's not showing. I don't know where it ended up. but I had it up and I could move the dock anywhere I wanted on the screen. It was kind of crazy.
All right. Thank you.
Sure thing. There's that main zoom window. There's those guys.
Now, I know Ori is a big Siphon user, so I saw his eyebrow raise when you talked about Siphon.
So yeah, I can take the output of this via Siphon and then bring it in, create it on its own canvas, maybe at a smaller resolution even, and then bring it in as a pip. And then I can manipulate what's going on with that Siphon in its pip, and then have it displayed in another queue going somewhere else.
That's awesome.
So here is something that's way cool. I want to delete you guys out and throw in my slideshow. How many of you guys are asked to just hand it a bunch of slides and say, make a slideshow for me?
Never once.
So I'm just going to pick my folder
What are
of
those things you speak of?
Yeah, I'm just going to pick my desktop. All right. All the pictures that were used in my PowerPoint deck. And I have all sorts of options: file name, date. So say you've done all this, the photographer's given you slides on day 1, but then on day 2, they want to keep those old slides, but add the new ones. Oh, and they say, we want the new ones to show up first in the slideshow. So you can put the date ascending or descending as far as, date created. And then when you take this queue, it'll fade between all the various slides. And you can set a time and have it loop, or always restart at the beginning of the slideshow.
That's awesome.
That's a pretty killer feature.
Yes, it is.
So here's getting in. We've done a little bit here. You can throw text right onto here if you have, say you want to send a note to someone. There it is. And you see, I mean, everything just moves, and it moves in real time. And you can even apply all these crazy modes, Photoshop modes, right? It's a great shirt for this. The difference mode.
No, sorry. Did you just have to change the layer order? Because it was behind your picture a second ago.
It wasn't behind it. It was darkening it so you couldn't see it.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. It was always in front because it's on top. If you see over here.
Yeah. That's why I was curious.
Yeah. That was a little misleading. As soon as I did it, I'm like, ooh, that looks like it went behind, but it really wasn't.
Got it.
So there's that. Here's my the
Hey,
output.
Dave, not to interrupt you, but if anyone's just tuning in, ask your questions in the Facebook comments for us. We'll get in as deep as you guys ask questions. So post your questions and comments, and we'll take them live as we're going. We usually kind of wrap up the demo portion in a little bit, but we started a little late, so we're happy to keep going before we jump into some more roundtable discussion. But get those questions in for us so that we have some stuff we can talk about.
Absolutely. So here's how the dashboard works. If you have a piece of media that you want to span multiple queues and it doesn't change, you just grab the arrow and drag it across all those queues. So now when I take these other queues, they all include the text. But say now, this is my FaceTime camera. So you see my green screen behind me. But this is my UTAP SDI input box. And oh, the SDI input box is seeing the output of the switcher, which is the text. It's not my face. If I were to switch to that, but now you're not seeing the output, so I have to see one or the other. The limitations of an online demo are amazing. Let me pick a different piece of content so you guys can see it here. Let's go into my test videos and throw this video in. Now, what you saw is you saw the video show up in my library. As soon as I throw it into something, it'll show up here. I can also go grab stuff. I can drag content right into here. If I know I have a bunch of content that I know I'm going to want to put in. So here I've got this animation video, it's just an MP4 on this queue, and I've got my live FaceTime camera on the other. So I'm going to cut between queues. Are you guys hearing the audio?
We are not. I'm not. You probably had to
That's
do
fine.
that in your sharing.
Yeah, that's fine. It's so dramatic. So here's something that's a little interesting about Millumin. When I first started using it, I would click on the layer because I wanted to make this video ISO opacity larger or smaller. So I would make it the size I wanted, and then I would click onto this queue, and now it shrunk my window. Because what it's doing is I'm applying that scaling to the entire layer. So any content I drop onto that layer will be scaled into that amount. Does that make sense? And if I wanted to then rescale myself back up, I'd have to put myself in a new layer.
Were those? Was that by percentage, or it does like an absolute, or a relative value, not a size, a pixel size?
Correct.
Got it.
And you can separate it and stretch it.
Okay, now I can see. I had to zoom my picture because I have a lot of things.
Yeah. So now I've got my video, and I want to go back to this queue. Now this one I have never shrunk, so it's still nice and big. Here's another, wow, I don't like being this big. Here is some interesting little things. You've got this tool, which allows you to move stuff around in the canvas. This tool, it vexed me for the longest time. When you hit this, you pull your mouse up and down to zoom in and out of the canvas. So you grab it and you push up to zoom into the canvas, pull it back to zoom down. As far as I know, this isn't documented anywhere. It's the craziest thing. If I've zoomed down or if I have moved my canvas off and I have no idea where it went, I can hit this one and it kind of pretty much centers and sizes the active canvases into the output area. So you can do something crazy like that and you just hit it and it gets right back. Here's something I've used Millumin for where I didn't have the snapping surfaces and I just had multiple screens, but I wanted bezels in between. And so, a little bezel on the content. I went into that advanced output. My screen sharing thing popped up. Go away. There we go. Oh. I'm trying to get to the output window at the top. There we go. Output window. So I had multiple screens, but I wanted a little bezel space in between. But I wanted the content, if it flew across them, to, you know, if someone's head was going across, I want it to look like it was hiding behind the bezel. So I could do multiple outputs, then go into advanced. And what you saw was canvas 1, canvas. Oh, did that wrong. Apologize. Boom. 1. Oh, I did that right. No one's more impressed than I was able to, in advanced, slide the different output windows or regions of interest within the canvas so that you saw just all those canvases relative to each other. And for the life of me, I'm sorry I can't show it to you right this second.
So there is a question from Facebook. Is there a way around having to create a new layer for each different video size?
I haven't found one.
There is a new introduction. So if you click on the layer and where we were able to change the sizing options, actually might be in the content. So if you click on the content, where you were able to select separate X, Y, you can click on normalize. And if your layer is a full screen layer set to a 1920 1080 canvas and click normalize, if your content is smaller than that, it would normally appear smaller, but the normalize will force it to fill the canvas, if that makes sense.
I think, sorry, I think a couple of people had that same kind of question.
Yeah, it was kind of frustrating. That first use case where I had all the logos, I had a lot that were the same size, but I ended up with about 30 layers because that was Millumin version 2, where you couldn't adjust each one individually. So I just had each logo on its own layer. It was an impressive looking dashboard because it just had a bunch of layers with just one thing. They kind of stair step down, you know, one here, then one here, then one there, then one there. But I did see in one of the tutorials where he did resize some video, and I like the normalize where it will automatically snap to.
Yeah, that applied to the bottom video that you've got, not to your camera input. So if you do the animation video that you've got on the bottom layer, yeah. And then is it not coming up there?
And it's weird because this is the latest version. It just came out, 2 days ago. So
I've clicked on the layer there, sorry. So to the left, click on layer. There you go. So go to the top of where you're scrolling. So constraint, click on the little cog to the right of where it says constraint. And then uncheck pixel constraint and check normalize. So now what will happen is that video will be forced to like a global setting. So if you play that video back, and then because you've scaled it down and change your position values, any content that you drop on that layer will fit inside that window now, regardless of the source size of the video.
interesting. So let's just throw this in.
Yep.
Yep.
So if you've
right
got
in.
content which is not the same as all the others, it'll force it to fit within that window. So if that window you stretch to be full canvas size, anything you drop into that. So if it's a 128720 video, usually you have to put that on a separate layer. Drop on the same layer, have that normalized checked, and it'll force it.
So we've got, while we were there, I was testing that with one of our built-in shaders, one of our generators. So those are, here are the shaders. these are the few that come with it. There's some fun ones. One's nice. Who doesn't need a clock from time to time? And the fact that you can just take that and move it here and then throw that down the bottom, and your show will begin shortly.
So someone was asking if it maintains aspect ratio.
You can go in here and keep your pixels constrained or separate XY. Now you can adjust the aspect ratio. Are you talking about the normalize?
I'm not sure that's all they said was, does it maintain aspect ratio? But
I
Del
don't
Miller
know how
was
it would. If it really did fill it, that would be something you'd have to play with. But
normalize does not maintain aspect ratio. So normalize will force stretch it to fit that output size.
What I have done in the good old days of 4.3 16:9 stuff was I had a layer for 4.3 and a layer for 16:9 content. Yeah. And then I was able to drop it in and it, and let it size to fit.
People are happy about the normalizing feature.
Yes, that's a new feature, and that is fantastic. So just throwing some of these shaders in. Some of them are really complex. They're kind of crazy. I'm just gonna... And so I'm going to click on this shader here. And you see you've got all sorts of settings. See if I can find one that really does something.
No, with that one, if you change the density to a higher density, it'll really fry your machine. It'll get it toasty.
Oh, here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So turn
if you start...
And there's...
Yeah, I can hear the fan spinning up a little bit. But now so I'm just going to do this. And we found something we found a little parameter that is effective. So I'm going to show you interactions. I mentioned that you can adjust things based on other input. Up here next to the output window is where you have interactions. And you click on this, you're like, what in the world do I do with this? So you click into plus. If you have your key, you obviously have a keyboard on your computer, you can assign hotkeys. If you have a MIDI controller, OSC commands, DMX input commands, ArtNet commands, all sorts of things. I'm going to choose audio. And it's going to take my built-in microphone, and you see it there. And what you can do is you can isolate. So just the low end of my voice, low, is going to trigger this output, but the S is not going to trigger it. Are you ready for that?
I am so ready for this.
Oh, boy, I am ready to see this work. I'll choose an action. So that is constellation intensity. Check 1, 2, 3, 4. Test 1, 2, 3. Hey. So if I boom, 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 or you see when it doesn't affect it, but the boom, the bass does.
That's awesome.
And this is where you can put in your Connect camera, and when you wave your hand across, it'll affect a parameter. When you can assign, if you have the leap hand gesture recognizer, it will actually look at your individual fingers, and you can assign different parameters to each finger. Here you can also have it accumulate things, toggle, just turn things off and on. Check, check, boom, boom. So you've got tremendous capabilities. Accumulator. So as it gets triggered, it gets bigger and bigger until you get to the max. And here you see what it's doing. If you say, I never want it to get that big, you can say the top value is that big. And I'm going to make it a linear. Check, check, check. So it's never going to get as big as it was there. Or I can say, get all the way that big. Check, check. Now you see that my audio, the fan on the Mac is not letting it go completely silent. So I'm going to hit calibrate, and this comes up and it says learn limits. Check, 1, 2, 3. See what it did now? Now it's taking the fan, and I can then come in and adjust my bottom limit and the top, and as it's kind of jerking around, I can smooth that out. Check, 1, 2, 3. So imagine what you can do. I'm just affecting one parameter on one generator. You don't have to even use generators for this. You can have it choose to turn your lights up and down. You can manage transitions. You can launch columns. So every time the bass hits, it changes to the next column, or go to a specific column. So you could have a mic or a drum trigger that whenever they hit that drum, it launches something.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I'm gonna find a way to connect a theremin to this, and that's gonna start being in my tech kit. And I'm just, got to keep it interesting at the tech table.
That's all I'm gonna say.
So something they also have that we haven't touched on is the master screen. And where is that sucker? Is it here? No. Do you know where the masters are?
While you look for that, anybody on Facebook, if you have more questions, it's getting close to 8:30 Eastern time. We wrap up about 9 o'clock, and we're going to kind of go into a round table discussion in a little bit. So get those questions in so that we have something to talk about.
Yes, absolutely. There is a little panel that has a master opacity for all video, a master volume for all audio, a master DMX, like a grandmaster for all your DMX values. And you can tie these interactions to that. So here I have it set to the master opacity on video. So as I talk, doesn't affect it, but bass does. And maybe I'll move it down here where only highs affect it. Boom, boom, boom. So imagine one interaction, the treble in the track does one interaction and the bass creates another. So you imagine the crazy art you can do with that. And there's all sorts of generators.
So you can have your boots and your cats do different things, right?
Boots and cats can do different things. Absolutely. And now I really wish I knew where that master was because I accidentally turned it down.
Is that the opacity you're looking for?
The video master. Set up output for this. Okay, timeline. So I will create a new interaction just to turn it back up, and schedule connect. So here's where your connect camera goes in. You could set up a schedule where it automatically turns up the volume, and so you have a museum exhibit or something that, say, an LED wall. You can have it set, if it's an outdoor venue, where the LED wall slowly brightens up over time as it gets darker, or dims down as it gets darker. All right, so I'm going to choose this action, video master, and check. Okay. That was a kind of weird workaround for that. So here's this generator. Here's where you can download it. You can have lots of pixels or just a few. Base colors. Some of them are, this is kind of a fun one. So again, they have all sorts of parameters you can noodle with. The top half versus the bottom half. And you can overlay these. I'll move this up here. And what's crazy is you see I'm doing this and it's doing it in real time. I mean, I'm manipulating this stuff as, so I'm going to drag this cue and you see it's still playing out. Now I can take it and I just cleared the other cue. I just totally changed it. Now, something everyone always asks is, how do I make these cues fade from one to the other? I'm just going to keep this down here so you can see it span. With the edit board clicked, bring this back up. So now it's in playback only mode. If you click on stuff, it doesn't really do anything. You hit the edit board. Now what you see is a little thing will pop up right under here. This is where you can set your transition times. So I can set a 1 second transition and I can jump from column to column or add columns. That added a column. Oh, this is where you jump from column to column. One tab. This is where you can also name cues. So this cue is going to be circles. And then I can go to this one and call it squares or mosaic. And then I'm going to go to this one and I'm just going to remove this column. So now, jump out of my edit mode. When I click it, you see the thing slide from one to the other. See how that works? And that works the same with lights. The lights fade. And you see my content spanned. So I didn't change, just the other content. Just touching on lights real quick. We didn't even, well, let's get into timelines before we do that. So if you have multiple canvases, you will see multiple groupings of layers. And you can go right here and you can just add more and more. This doesn't really get any smaller, so you end up scrolling a lot. There's a pane over here that shows some stuff. If I go to this video, it'll show the waveform. I can jump around the audio, or I can see the audio waveform. I can jump around the video. Go to last 10, pause it. You can go in here and show time remaining. So if you want to give a count out, you see I've got 23 seconds left. That's really loud to me. Scale position. So here's just a little extra ad, and if you need to see that really big, you can just open that up and you can see it counting down. So I'm going to take a different cue. My clock's up. Now I'm going to go into video and you see it start counting out. So for all those guys who are ready to replace Playback Pro, this is a viable option and you don't have to have a dongle.
Because you mentioned audio, can you just play back audio tracks?
Yes. Do I have an audio track? I don't think I have any audio only files in here.
Yeah.
But what you will see when you do play it is you will see the waveform.
Got it.
And when I'm in this layer, there is a way to, it will fade up the audio if you have a fade set, the audio and video.
Right. And you can trim the clips, I'm assuming?
You can in the timeline mode. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, you can set in and out point. So if you click on the video or audio asset, there is a selection under edit board mode where you can then select an in and out time. So here, start and end points.
You can also route if you have multiple audio outs. You can send the audio to various places. So if you want one video to play out of the main output, but say you have a sound effect that's supposed to play out of a speaker on the set, and you feed that out, a USB audio interface. So you can set on at least a layer basis, if not a clip basis, where that file will send its audio.
Great.
So that's kind of slick.
And have you done anything with the routing it through Dante? Like with virtual sound card or anything?
I have not personally.
Got it.
No.
I've messed around with that. We had an event where surround sound was needed. So we created 5-track sound within the video. Millumin plays back each of the channels. We routed that via Dante to the Yamaha board. And you just, within here, you see the Dante patching. So you see like here, it'll just give you the Dante patch for as many Dante channels as you've got active.
Copy that. Got it. While we're, before we get too far from what you were just showing, Del Miller was asking about those last 10. He has a couple questions. So is there a way to do last 10 for all videos in a column?
No.
No. Okay.
So if I'm playing, and I just click here, I can see that's at 23. So, I can get close.
Gotcha. But there's
Just
no
kind of eyeballing it.
Jump to last 10. Copy.
No. Yeah, you see
there was a
that
new
when it
feat-
got to
there's-
the last 10, it turned red. That's a new feature I just saw.
Within the queues there, so just above on there, so with the queues you can set up individual queues for videos. So you hit the plus
Oh.
there, you can then say, okay, when you trigger column on dashboard column 2, start it at a certain time. So when you hit recall on that, and then you can put this onto Stream Decks, you can recall it at 10 seconds or 30 seconds prior to the video total runtime.
That's
So
great.
it's a manual workaround.
Well, that was Dell followed up his question with, can you jump to the last 10 quickly? Will Stream Deck with companion control allow for like a last 30, a last 10 command?
So you kind of have to manually create the queues within this area and then have Stream Deck trigger the recall buttons for each of the queue stacks that you've made.
And you'd have to do that for every video, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lot
It's
of
kind of
workaround.
it's an ugly workaround,
Yeah.
but it is possible. And I finally found where this hidden window is with the video master. So here's the video, audio, and DMX grandmasters. So
where did you find it?
when I expanded out this side where you see the countdown on the waveform under cues, it's masters right there. Not the most, why that isn't in a window up here.
Right in
I
plain
don't know.
sight.
Yeah, exactly. You can see why I was fumbling for it.
While you're still on this topic, can you make the TRT bigger and smaller? I think you just showed that a minute ago.
It as you push it down, it does shrink, and that's as big as it gets.
Okay, got it. Excellent.
So
We do have some questions piling up. For everybody who has asked questions, I've got a list going. So once we get to a point where we kind of move to our round,
Let me hit
table.
timelines. I'm going to try to blast through timelines and lighting, and then we'll just go wide open questions. How's that
Great.
sound?
Great.
All right. So here, if you want a timeline, here's my dashboard. I'm going to click over to timeline. And so this changes to a timeline base, and you see that a timeline opened up in your inputs. So now if I go back to dashboard, I can drag that timeline in as an element, and I can take it and it's going to play that timeline. So I'm going to click over to my timeline, and I'm going to throw my video file into it. You see the waveforms? I think this is how you can trim it. Not exactly sure. Maybe it just shortens it. If you go past it, you see that it loops it. You can this is where you can add keyframes. You can add keyframes of opacity, position, scale, rotation, mapping, the speed of the clip, and the audio volume. So I'm just going to check the audio volume. So I check that box. And so say it's a little quiet here. So I'm going to click the clip. And why is it not? There's probably a keyboard command for it. You're going to add a keyframe here, and then if you hit curves, you can actually ramp up nice and smooth the keyframes.
I think if you click on the little diamond where it says audio volume, just to the right of that.
Oh, there we
add
go.
The keyframe.
Thank you. Yeah, so here I'm going to add another keyframe, and here I'm going to add another keyframe. And then if I click curves, I can say right here it's going to turn down. So that I can play it. Now I heard it because I'm hearing the audio. I heard it turn down when it did that. I'm sorry I can't share that with you guys right this second. Not exactly sure how to route that in. Yeah, I'm just gonna. Yep. Now you also have the same keyframe capability in the dashboard. That's one of the new features that just rolled out. So you can go right in here and add a keyframe of, say, opacity. I can keyframe that. I have to edit. And I'm not exactly sure how that works, but you can watch a tutorial at Millumin. I want to get you through this.
Just be a value 0 to 100. So if you're at 100 there, then drag it, stretch that over to the next column and do 50 on that.
Got it.
Then go from 1% to 50% or whatever you want.
50. So it's based on the column. Yeah. 100.
So if you were to sort of try to put a keyframe like that for position, you put the XY position value for each of the points that you want.
1%, and then I bring it up to 50%, and then I take it to 100%. So you can keyframes pretty quickly and pretty simply, just doing something along those lines. As well as timelines, you can imagine if you throw other content. Let me add another layer. Throw other content in here. If I wanted this to ramp up with a keyframe of opacity, at this point. So now it's in one video and transitions to the other. Oh, and if you click on the keyframe, you see all the different types of keyframes. It gives you a little info. You can ease them in and out. And things of that nature. So that's timelines. Those, sorry, I did not give that justice, but I want to get into lighting and then get your questions. You can have multiple timelines. You just click here and you'll create a second timeline. And you see another one jumped in and a third. And those can all, when I go back to my dashboard, so I can have, you know, timeline 2 here, timeline 3 down here, and they can all be doing different things, playing different clips, you name it.
And can they play at the same time
If
if you stack them?
I stack them, they would.
Got it.
This timeline would play in front of this timeline, but you could apply a blend mode to it. If it's in a pip, you know, you could see them both, obviously, or they could go to different canvases.
That's what I was going to say, if they were on different canvases.
Yes. I'm going to create another canvas and close this. And what you see down here is I have canvas 1 and canvas 2. And you see that my canvas 2 starts down here, so I can put this timeline on canvas 2.
Yep.
So it's gonna play one timeline on this canvas and one timeline on this canvas. Does that kind of make sense?
Yep, absolutely.
All right, just jumping into lights because I want to get to some questions. Here's where one last thing. Boy, there's so much now. If I click this, everyone always wanted a preview. This is how they've accomplished preview. It's this little grid button, and you just put what you want. I can say, oh, I want the previous column in canvas 1. I want the previous column in canvas 2, and I want the current column in canvas 2, and here's the next column in canvas 2. So if I'm over here, I don't have much going on in canvas 2. Let me move some things down in there. Make this a little bigger so you can see it. You see that, and one neat thing about this is I can make this bigger if there wasn't anything here. Remove this one. I can make this preview bigger. I can set as many of these boxes I want. I can make them, you know, just higher numbers. You can set the refresh rate and how quickly it loops things. And so now, as I'm clicking through cues, previous and next column are here of the various things. And you see that it's previewing what's coming next. If you go into options on one of these, oh, you can name it. So this might be my canvas 1 next. And this might be my canvas 2 next. And you see they show up right there. I can also take any of my inputs. So I can take my FaceTime camera and throw it in here. And when it refreshes, oh, I have to pick it out. FaceTime HD camera. It should be popping up. There it is. So I can set inputs to always be here, or certain columns to always be there.
That's cool.
So that's the preview window. That's kind of a neat new feature. Wish you guys could hear the music. It's really impressive. Okay, so
I'm glad we can't, so we don't get dinged on Facebook.
yeah, exactly.
Very good point.
Another thing on these generators. Oh, here's how this little thing works. You click on it, and then I'm moving the mouse up, I'm moving the mouse down. So it's kind of like a navigator tool. So here I am on Canvas 2. I'm going to click on this content, and I can pick something in here like, what were we animating? The intensity or something? Here we go. This. I can have it use this brush, and I can animate a brush stroke across that, and it affects the parameters. Now this is on canvas 2. Let me move it back to canvas 1 so you can see it on the output over here. There it goes. So now I can click that feature and move it around in real time. Is that it? There's one of these. There we go. So that's the one I want to click. And it was just doing it, and I've missed my sets of keystrokes to do that. All right, let's move on to lights. Here's the lighting setup. Once I've clicked over into lights, it starts like this. Most people start with a lighting plot. And so now you have the option to throw a lighting plot. You can throw an image file in. I just happen to have a nice simple one. There it is. Oh, it's not very big, so I want to make it nice and big. And now I can add a light. Here's my first little light. And that is a Fresnel. And as I bring the brightness up, you see it gets wider. Fresnels only have, it's a DMX dimmer channel. And I can show all my DMX channels. As I add lights and add dimmer channels, I can assign which channel it is. Right now it's set to feed out over ArtNet. But if I had a DMX device, I would see it show up in here, and I could turn on the interface. So there's one light. Let's add another light next to it. And that'll be this light. And that's Alico ellipsoidal reflector spotlight. And I want it to face this direction. So I just grabbed the rotation and just moved my hand back and forth. And that one's going to be on DMX channel 2. And as it brightens up, just like that. And here on this monitor, you also see, I can see all my lights. I can flash lights. I can see where all their levels are at. So I can say, this is Q1. So I can save that. So here's this column. I'm going to save it to that column. And now it's created a little lighting layer, and you see that I've got lights in it. I want the opposite to be true. So on my next look, I want this light to go down and this light to go up. And I want to save it to that layer. So now, if you look at the two lights, when I change layers, you see they change. And you see the DMX values down lower change.
That's pretty simple, actually.
It's very simple, but you can imagine if you've got 100 lights and say you've got a, you can download a ton of fixtures, but even RGBW par, 24-bit RGBW par, if every fixture had four sliders and getting them just right.
Right.
And now you see all the DMX values moving as I'm just adjusting green, what it's got to do to get that. Or just adjusting blue. It gets kind of crazy.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Does Millumin itself have an upper limit on channels or fixtures?
Not really. It's pretty crazy because in ArtNet, it goes really insane. So
it turns into fun where you start playing with moving heads, where you've got pan, tilt, zoom, and like if you pick a on a Playpacky spider that's got a silly amount of DMX controllable values. So yeah, you're not going to run out. You run out when you run out physical RNA outputs.
Yeah, open-fixture-library.org. You can download fixtures and drop them in. And he does have a demo on installing light fixtures. Oh, and this is where you drop them. And there's a README on where you go and how you drop them in. And then they just show up. So you can load your fixtures in.
They don't use they use their own open fixture library, and
Correct.
if the fixture doesn't exist there, you can submit your fixture to be converted from its own format to one that works here. That's free, and they're actually quite quick at that as well. So if you had a new fixture or something strange, or if it's not there.
So that's kind of the gist of it. I was thinking it wouldn't take as long, but they've put in so many new features. And if you see, there's a time change. Over in this time window, it lights up when it's finished, the transition. See, it goes to follow and then finished. So, all right, let's look at some questions.
Yeah, super in depth. Thank you for that walkthrough. So I have a list of questions here. A couple of them we kind of took as we went. I'll start actually. Are there any questions with the panel before we? And then maybe if you can stop the share on your screen.
Just one thing that I have that I found very helpful when dealing with multiple canvases, if you need the same video to play back on two canvases at the same time, don't drop the media in twice. You could do what's called a copy layer. So you add a copy layer to your second canvas and then tell that layer to look at canvas one at a particular point, and it just copies it, and it doesn't actually take any more processing power. So what you're saving there is keeping everything in sync, but then saving processing as well.
Right, that's resource management then.
Yeah.
Got it. Is there anything that that preloads, like in QLab, that preloads the content so that it's ready to go, so there's no lag in playing a file?
My assumption is if you've got preview turned on, possibly.
There is a setting within preferences to force preload. I think it's actually called that. I'll have a quick look on mine.
Show index workspace.
Yeah, so under preferences and then board, at the bottom it says force movie preload.
Yep.
So it'll kind of cache everything on that file.
Mm.
I wouldn't do that.
Right, I was gonna say that'll load your RAM down.
So what it does is if it runs out of RAM or it looks like it's going to be tight, it will only do the next column. But it does recommend you leave the setting off unless you know what's going on. So it will try to preload every movie.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's jump into some of the Facebook questions, unless there's anything else from the panel. Cool. We'll go to Facebook. A question that came in a while ago from Del Miller was, question I have has been, I've been utilizing my Stream Deck to trigger Millumin 3 machines for playback. Usually involves triggering multiple sized canvases and delay screens, etc. Be curious to see how you like setting up your Stream Deck on larger shows. I usually just trigger column numbers on my timeline, but might there be a more productive setup with my Stream Deck? Are either of you guys using Stream Deck, Hardeep or Dave?
I have one. I have not used it with Millumin.
Okay.
I've used it with Playback Pro and AV Playback and such. I've found that when I was using Millumin, I wanted the ability to just snatch stuff around on the timelines in the dashboard for changes. So I wasn't programming much with the Stream Deck, but it's very capable. companion plugins very.
I think I've used it in the same way that Dell's mentioned already, just kind of have hotkeys programmed up. So if you know you need to go to a temporary slate or VT1, VT2, VT3, you just have them, and then wherever they are on the dashboard or in your timeline, it just reverts it back to that point.
And I do tie it with the E2 sometimes.
Yeah.
So if you want to trigger an E2 look or preset and Millumin to play at the same time.
Right. Got it. That makes sense. Dean Bennett asked, is there any way to use data source for text layers, CSV/RSS feed, etc.? So that was an early question too. So
Yeah.
those text layers you were doing.
That is a great question.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, it really is.
As far as I know, I don't
I'm
think
not
you can.
aware of that.
Okay.
That would be a great if that's a use case for you, log into one of the developers' live streams and ask that question, and you'll see him write it down, and he'll tell you right then and there whether that's something he's interested in developing.
There's also a page that we set up on the you could access it through the support page on Millumin website. It's called User Voice. User Voice is just a list of what everyone wants, and they will then say, yep, doable, or no, i.e. Windows version.
Yeah.
Everyone's like that, saying, please make one. They say no. Have a look at there. So there might be ideas and stuff already
And you
in the
can
pipeline.
upvote and downvote, I believe, the ideas. So if it's an idea you like or don't like, maybe you can only upvote, but I'm pretty certain you can go both ways.
Great. Richard Bright, this was another earlier question. When you say side by side for canvas on outputs, do you do that by arrange? Just testing out on my Millumin. So he was following along. I think you were doing the dual canvases.
Up at the top, there is, it's called input or layout. It's called layout, horizontal, vertical, or advanced. And so as you add canvases, it'll do if you've got a horizontal, they'll be side by side and they'll join into one giant canvas. Those will just be multiple outputs of the one canvas.
Got it. Ibrahim asked, and funny story, Ibrahim, today I've been working for a webcasting company, and today Ibrahim and I were working together, and I was like, oh, I'm doing this thing with Millumin. He's like, oh yeah, I got an invite for that. And I was like, I'm the host on that show. He's like, no way. So it was a very interesting thing. He's out in California. I heard about it from a friend in Florida. So thank you guys for sharing. Tell your friends. We're here every Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern time. We'll talk about what we have coming up soon. But Ibrahim said, I've used auto follow to trigger a sequence of things in the timeline, then land on one that looped infinitely.
Correct.
For intro as a presenter, walked on stage, play a intro bumper. Is there an easier way to do that?
The timeline is great at doing a section, and then when it gets to a certain point, it's got a loop back point. Watch Out's also great at that too, but they've really made that very easy. And you split the clip and you say loop from this point to this point, or loop this section.
Yeah, like D3 does something similar, and Ori, that would in QLab that would be like using a vamp queue, right?
Right.
Yep, exactly.
Gotcha.
I mean, in my entire use of Millumin, I've never used a timeline. I don't know why. I've just been anti-timeline, and some of the reasons is you can program all these cues and autos and have things overlap where you've got audio, video overlapping different sequences. Do it all from the dashboard and use your auto follow and auto stops, and it's a different way of programming. But what I found is it allows me flexibility. If someone changes the length of a clip or wants to jump around, I just change that clip in the dashboard and not worry about where it fits within the timeline.
Yep. Yeah, the dashboard is far more powerful than you realize. People want to get into timeline because they understand it from video editing or After Effects or whatever, but you're just dealing with objects in the dashboard. And so you can tell that object, that cue in the dashboard to loop. And so you could say Q1, play, and then auto follow into column 2, Q2, and then loop column 2. And then when you're ready to get out of the vamp, you just hit Q3.
Nice. Del Miller again, random question. How can I change the default audio preset in Millumin for any new clips I add in versus having to define routing to external DI for each new clip added one by one? Can you predefine preferred behaviors for new video content that is being drug in by default?
I don't believe you can.
No, you
Yep.
can't.
You have to do it one by one.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dell.
I learned
Yeah.
that the hard way because we've done the Dante surround sound, and every clip
Oh,
you had to apply the same states, and it's not
Brutal.
nice.
yeah, no.
But put it on the user voice. Let's ask them to make that change.
Now, what you could do is you could throw a clip in, duplicate that column several times, so that the routing's the same, and then just replace the clips.
Right.
Now they have a
good.
replace clip function, so the routing should stay the same. I don't know if it travels with the clip when you
I
change
don't
it.
think it does. I think it locks it to the clip, and then you change the clip, and you have to reroute
Could be.
audio. Yeah,
That's
worth a look.
That's unfortunate. Then we got through some of these questions with the last 10. We did those. Okay, another one from Dell. Very silly question, but I have yet to find the autosave setting like editing programs have to automatically save so often. I usually just manually save my project multiple times each day. Is there a way to automate the saving process? Maybe
Yes.
to a networked folder, share between two machines, change in real time, perhaps.
There is an autosave. It's in the general preferences. You have the option of 5, 15, 30 minutes, or every hour. Those are the options, or never.
Got it.
And now you can't specify where the autosaves happen. They'll just save into your current project file wherever it happens to live.
Got it.
But if that file was on Dropbox, or OneDrive, every time it resaved, OneDrive would
get it.
It would take it.
I'd imagine that would affect performance, though. No.
Yeah, you wouldn't want that happening during show.
Right. But during rehearsals, maybe you can get away with that.
Yeah.
Amazingly, we've actually gotten through all of the Facebook questions. So yes, that's awesome. We are running a little bit late. We usually do a hard out at 9 p.m., but since we started a little bit late, that's okay that we're running a little bit late. Does our panel have anything that they would like to touch on while we got Dave and Hardeep here? Jason, you got anything?
I know we've talked about, or you guys touched on hotkeys and companion use with Stream Deck to control Millumin. Is there also, I know with QLab, there's like an OSC API where you can basically take full control of the program's features. Is there something like that with Millumin?
In the interactions, you do have the option of OSC commands. So you can send OSC commands to it. OSC message.
We've done things, touch OSC on iPads. That'll integrate within Millumin. Not fully, but you can control intensity faders, opacities, and trigger certain things.
There is a YouTube video on that with an iPad and touch OSC, I believe.
But you can't do anything so detailed as like mapping media, changing inputs.
You can now. You can.
Oh, okay.
It's not as intuitive to go into the layers within there, so you should still have access to your laptop or the Mac itself. But once you're in there, yes, you can do sort of the corner correction and mapping through an iPad.
Thank you.
Is there any sort of time code that or genlock that you can do with Millumin?
Genlock, no. I believe it will output timecode.
It'll output and listen to timecode as well, so you can have columns or parts of the dashboard.
So you can set
by
it.
a timecode.
Yeah, when it sees a certain time code go by, it'll trigger a certain action. It isn't like if you run the time code in reverse, on a deck, it's not going to track time code over time, but it sets to when it sees a certain time code hit, it'll trigger an event.
Okay. Can it receive time code from like MIDI time code or anything like?
The time code input, Yeah, I don't have any timecode devices, but
Yeah, it's on MIDI and audio based.
yes.
Great. So you can have your shows synced. I was gonna ask you-
Arduino. I was gonna say Arduino is another thing that we've played around with. We had a user case projector with a cycling bike put in front of it. So we put a dynamo onto the bike to capture voltage. That went into Arduino. Arduino went into Millumin, and just Millumin sees the whole thing and says, "I see voltage. What do I do with it?" And you just, like Dave's already shown, adjust a opacity layer with that.
That's cool.
And you could say adjust the rotation so that it, the projection follows the wheel.
Yeah.
And speeds up if the wheel speeds up.
Cool. Those were the things I wanted to know about. So I think we're getting close to wrapping up, if that's all right. I want to thank Dave and Hardeep for passing along all this amazing info. I want to thank everybody out on Facebook for the questions. Really good stuff. If you have any more follow-up questions, just let us know. We are next week. We're here every Monday, like I said, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, US. Next week, Justin Herminghaus is coming on. His talk is, I love that he titled it, is Data Networks for Production, Fundamentals, Tips, and Traps. So I'm going to have to get a General Akbar image that I can throw up every once in a while. But yeah, no, it's going to be production IT. In our roles, we're all becoming IT professionals as opposed to just AV people or audio or lighting or video. So this is going to focus on some of those basics and things to watch for.
So basically, get your notebooks ready because these are things you're going to want to write down to make your production that much better.
Absolutely, and Justin is pretty brilliant when it comes to production IT. So I've worked very closely with him for a couple of years, and it's going to be a talk you want to be at. You want to share that one for sure with anybody you know in the industry. The following week we're going to be doing vMix, so we'll have a deep dive like this on vMix, and then I believe the following week after that is audio with Ed. Yeah, on the 31st. I had to look at the calendar to know what date how many weeks out we are. So
long awaited.
Yes, we bumped me last week, which was well worth it because our talk last week was phenomenal. But yes, we will get into audio for the end of the month, and then we're going to be taking off for Labor Day, which is September 7th. So that's our next few weeks of shows. So make sure you tune in. Go like the AV Educate page. I've posted the link in the Facebook a couple times, but I'll post it once more before we're off for the night. And if there's any last words from you, Chris, while I copy and paste that over.
Remember, you're only strong as your weakest cable.
I like that one.
Yep. Thanks so much, guys, for having me on.
Yes. Thank you for coming on. You and Hardeep. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. All right, guys. So thanks a lot. We are done for the evening. We'll see you next Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern, right here on AV Educate. This is Tech Talks, AV Tech Talks presented by AV Educate. See you next week.